All right. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. If we can, it's great to see you guys here today. So I am Vanya Womack, and for those who may not know me, I'm an adjunct professor here at Villanova, teaching in the political science department. I'm also the executive director for Refugees Unknown Stories Untold. It's an organization that works for human rights and collects stories of political refugees. I sit on a couple boards of NGOs, and I'm a consultant doing trainings and strategy work for human rights, peace projects, and movements worldwide. So I want to thank Philadelphia, based organization, Peace Islands Institute, and its director, Saeed Selmanar, who is here with us today, for his role in coordinating this event today for you. Peace Islands is located in Philadelphia, and they aspire to advance the aims of social justice and human rights through education, dialogue, and collaboration, bringing events like this today to communities like us at Villanova. So I want to thank a couple different people, the College of Liberal Arts and Science, the Office of Mission and Ministry, the Multi-Faith Ministry, the Center for Peace and Justice Education, and the Department of Political Science, and additionally, Political Science, Lowell Gustafson, who's here with us, and Chair of the Science Department, Camille Berg, and Jess Swartz, right down here, for their help and guidance as we talk about these crucial global issues. So presentations like the one we're going to hear today reach across disciplines. So it doesn't matter what area of study you're in or what job or industry that you're looking to enter, becoming more knowledgeable by listening to other perspectives only makes you more valuable. So it's very, very likely that you're going to gain different perspectives today, and you're going to learn things that you didn't know before. So I'm excited to introduce you to Roots, an extraordinary organization that's based in the West Bank, also called Judea and Samaria. But before I explain more about Roots, let me share my personal connection to this region, hence why I'm introducing them to you today. So let's rewind 32 years ago when I was studying abroad in the Middle East. It was 1992. I was a junior. How many of you are juniors? Okay. I was a junior, the same age as many of you today, and I lived with Palestinians and Israelis, gaining first-hand knowledge and insights into their lives, their hopes, and their fears. I wrote letters home back then about it, or I made occasional collect phone calls. So you guys have the right era, right? Yeah. Right? Okay, so you know that there were no computers, there were no cell phones. I just had this wind-up disposable camera and a big backpack. I took Arabic and Hebrew and culture and history courses, peace and conflict. I learned about archaeology. You know, when I was going through my journal, you might find this interesting from that time, I realized I had also met with groups such as Hamas, seeking to understand the conflict from their perspective. I heard from rabbis and scholars and universities throughout Egypt, Jordan, and Israel. You see, 1992 was a calm time following 1991, when Iraq initiated a missile campaign against Israel, when over 40 Scud missiles were fired into Israeli territory. But still, some incidents happened while I was there. Like we were staying at one of the universities, a car was blown up outside. You know, but my point is that this region of the world holds such an importance for the Abrahamic faiths, back then and today. It's a land soaked in history, and one that has withstood conflicts for centuries, changing hands of numerous empires and rulers. Now, fast forward with me to October of last year. I had returned to the region to strategize for two other inspiring organizations, Women of the Sun, a Palestinian group, and Women Wage Peace, an Israeli group. These two organizations and the women that started them just last week were named Time Magazine's Women of the Year, and they got a nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize. I spent days with them, visiting their organizations and homes, meeting their co-workers and families. And I attended the Mother's March, which happened on October 4th. I heard ambassadors and representatives from the EU and the United Nations speak about peace and people like Awad, the first on-the-ground regional director for ALMAT, which is called the Alliance for Peace in the Middle East. And I tell you this because you know what? You never know when you're going to run into people who know people in places you know. Huda happened to be a graduate of Eastern Mennonite University's Conflict Transformation Program. That's the very school I did my study abroad and graduated from. So October 4 was a great day. It's getting women from the border, from the West Bank, speeches and marches and an event spent at the Dead Sea where you had many political leaders and world representatives calling for peace. In the next couple days, I would go on to visit places in the West Bank and in the region. And one night, I visited the West Bank and sat under this open-air shelter. I'm pretty sure there were goats or cows in the background making some noise. But at this place called Roots, I was drinking tea, listening to a Rabbi Schlesinger talk about his life as a Jewish settler, a perspective and history of the land and how he came to recognize and want dialogue with Palestinians and to work for peace. I heard Ali Abu Awad, another Palestinian well-known activist, and his older brother talk about their time in prisons, death of their brother by the Israeli guards, their mother's work with Yasser Arafat and the PLO, and how they found a way beyond revenge and became friends and colleagues with settlers like Hanan. I heard about Noor Awad, whom you may also meet. My first thought was, wow, we need to hear these talks and perspectives in the US. Maybe, just maybe I can get them to Villanova. Well, now we have them in Villanova. So I was finishing packing my suitcase for my return flight when I found myself in an unexpected situation. I was in a basement bunker just 10 miles from Gaza, alongside a woman and her son, descendants of Holocaust survivors. One bomb was like, okay, this happens sometimes. But 12 sirens continued in the short amount of time I knew something was wrong. This was October 7th. It's hard to explain the sound of bombs hitting the Iron Dome. It's something like hitting a barrier or something bouncing off of it. But if they're close, it sounds like an explosion happening right overhead. Windows shake, the house shakes, blinds are pulled. I'm by a port and an air base with rockets. I can see smoke around me. All day and all night, I hear jets taking off constantly and helicopters, knowing what they're returning from. I was in the heart of a conflict that I hadn't anticipated. Now, I've spent time in conflict-ridden zones, El Salvador, Haiti, Libya, but the fear and horror I felt that day was unmatched. And it made me realize that those living in these conflict zones do not have the luxury of leaving when fear becomes too much. They live with this fear every day, and it permeates every aspect of their lives, no matter where they live in this region called the Holy Land. I ended up not getting out of Israel for another week. I lost people I spent days with talking about the region and their life as peacemakers, like Vivian Silver. She was a co-founder of one of the organizations I went there to support, Women Wage Peace. She would transport children needing medical help across the Gaza border. That was her job. She lived in Kibbutz Be'eri, and she was also a Canadian. I won't ever forget how she talked about her sons and grandchildren and how she loved to swing with them. We thought she was kidnapped, and weeks later, forensic archaeologists found out she had been burned in her home. Several women from Women Wage Peace lost their lives that day. Women who were a part of the peace movement, the best that they could be, have perished in Gaza. Friends in the West Bank have had their homes raided and torn apart. Those advocating for peace will face those who want to destroy them, and it's not easy work. Peacemakers who live and call this vast land their home now live with a constant fear, one that I have only experienced for a very short time, but one that stays with me and will for the rest of my life. I believe that fear, when harnessed right, can transform into a potent force. right? And it's from this power that can arise the chance to foster peace and not retaliation or revenge. So it depends on what you choose. Roots is an Israeli-Palestinian grassroots initiative for understanding nonviolence and transformation. They have a unique network of local Palestinians and Israelis who have come to see each other as partners. They both need to make and changes to end their conflict. Based on mutual recognition of people's national identity and connection to the land, and their connection to the land, they challenge their community's assumptions about each other. They build trust and they create discourse around the conflict with their respective societies. Roots has created and operates the only joint Israeli-Palestinian community center in the entire West Bank. This safe, holy space hosts social, religious, and educational activities. They bring together hundreds of Palestinians and Israelis who begin to realize that there are two truths, two stories, not one, in this land. And the only way forward is to cherish both of those. At Roots, local people learn to take responsibility for making change. From the bottom up, they've created this model for a better future. So I'm so excited you get to meet Roots today. They are out on a month-long tour in the United States, visiting college campuses and organizations, churches, synagogues, etc., all throughout the U.S. And you're really lucky because you guys get them before Penn. Okay. So together, let's honor the memory of those lost in this conflict on all sides by actively listening to those that might challenge our own perspectives. They will show us that progress isn't made through ignorance, but through active involvement and active engagement. And I commend each of you for being here today, even if you had to be. It may not be easy to enter into conversations where discomfort can arise, right? However, the fact that everyone is here and willing to engage and listen speaks volumes about the strength, to me, about the Villanova community. So I'm going to do something here. I'm going to introduce to you Hanan Schlesinger, who is the one that I heard when I was in the West Bank. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Noor, and then I'm going to let Rabbi Hanan come up and fill us in and move us forward, if that's all right. Okay. So Hanan Schlesinger is an Orthodox rabbi and a teacher and a passionate Zionist who's been profoundly transformed by his encounters with Palestinians and Palestinian people going back to 2013. He's originally from New York, and he immigrated to Israel on his own at the age of 20. He's lived in Allensput, Gush Etzion, I'm sure I'm butchering that, but he's been there for 40 years. He grew up in a secular Jewish family, but at the end of high school, he began delving into observant Judaism. He's done advanced Jewish studies, primarily at Har Etzion College of Jewish Studies, and that had the MA program of the Department Jewish Philosophy at Hebrew University. The first part of his professional career was devoted to teaching Jewish studies and to young adults, primarily in various colleges of Jewish studies and seminaries in the Jerusalem area. From 1998 to 2000, he served as a fellow in the Judaic Fellows Program in Boca Raton, Florida. And in 2005, he went to Dallas, Texas, to serve at the head of the community Kollel, and he spent 8 years there serving the Dallas Jewish community. He went on to found the Jewish Studies Initiative in North Texas, and in Dallas, he also became involved in interfaith work, first with Christians and then with Muslims. He founded Faiths in Conversation, a framework for Jewish, Christian, and Muslim theological dialogue there. And this inspired him to attempt to meet Muslims and Christians back in the Holy Land. So primarily, he's inspired by this interfaith experience that he's had in Dallas, and it became so much more meaningful to him than he had ever imagined. In 2014, early 2014, Ali Abu Awad and an Israeli partner, Shaul Juldeman, and Rabbi Hanan, and other Israeli and Palestinians founded Roots. And again, that was in 2014. He currently serves as the Director of International Relations, and he's also the founder of the American Friends of Roots, which is a multi-faith organization dedicated to supporting their work. Rabbinical Council of American member, part of the International Rabbinic Fellowship, Israeli Rabbinical Association, and Rabbis Without Borders. I could go on and on about all of his accolades. He and his Israeli-born wife, Alia, reside in Alan Shavut in Israel, and they have 4 grown children, and he has 11 grandchildren. So I want to welcome you, Hanan, and I do want to let you know, and I'm going to let Hanan explain a little bit, that we are without Noor Awad today. And so I'm going to let Hanan speak. And at the end, you're going to hear some videos and some things like that. And then at the end, we're going to have Q&A time. And then after that Q&A time, we'll have a closing before you guys leave. All right?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like us to take a journey together. We're taking a bus to the airport, getting on the plane. It's a transatlantic flight, 10, 12 hours. We then land in Ben Gurion Airport in the state of Israel, go through customs, get on another bus, and we are now traveling east toward Jerusalem. However, we veer a little bit to the south. The bus starts an incline. We're going higher and higher into the mountains. At a certain point, we pass an Israeli army checkpoint. The soldiers wave us through, and the scenery begins to change a little bit. On one side of the road, we see the Palestinian village of Jabba. Another side, we see Tzurif, another Palestinian village. The incline gets steeper and steeper, and finally we make it to the top of the mountain range. And there we see kibbutz, an Israeli kibbutz, Kfar Tzion. We see the town of Alon Shvut, where I live. We see a shopping center, and then the bus veers off onto a muddy dirt road. It's about a 3 or 4 minute drive, and it's very bumpy. We get off the bus, and we are told by the tour guide that we're now in the West Bank. We're entering into a Palestinian farmstead. There's many other Palestinian farms in the area. This particular piece of land is surrounded by a stone fence. There's a metal gate at the entrance. We walk in, and we see animals. There's some goats and sheep. We see bathrooms, classrooms, kitchen, a Beit Midrash, a Jewish study hall in Palestinian farmland. And we sit down in the classroom. That's where we are right now. I want to explain where we are right now, and for that, we need some background. Here it is. In the West Bank, Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs live very, very close to each other, but very far away. Geographically, one on top of the other almost, but in every other sense of the world, they are worlds apart. The two sides speak different languages, they have different cultures, different religions, that you probably knew. Did you know that the Israelis and the Palestinians there in the West Bank have different transportation systems? The taxis are separate, the buses are separate, and it is true that the Israeli Jews and the Palestinian Arabs sometimes drive on the same roads, sometimes not, but even when they drive on the same roads, they have different colored license plates, so you know who the other is. The health systems, completely separate. That means doctor, dentist, that means hospitals there in the West Bank. You'll never meet the other in the waiting room for the doctor. The educational systems, that means preschool and elementary school and middle school, high school up to college, they're in the West Bank completely separate. The economic systems are also separate. The products that people have in their homes, the Israelis have one set of products, the Palestinians have another set. And in addition to all that, the Israeli Jews and the Palestinian Arabs that are living so close to each other live under different legal systems. I live there as a citizen of the state of Israel, as a Jew. I'm a full citizen. I have legal political and civil rights, and my Palestinian neighbors live as citizens of no country with no civil and political rights. There we are living right next to each other. And if that's not enough of bad news, there's more. There's no common ground, and I do not mean that as a metaphor. I mean ground, literally. There's no common ground because Israeli military law that governs the lives of both sides says very clearly that Israeli Jews are not allowed into Palestinian towns, cities, and villages, and Palestinians are not allowed into Israeli towns, cities, and villages, except if the Palestinians are menial workers under armed guard during work hours with a work permit, and then they can enter Israeli areas to do their work and go home. But otherwise, there's no common ground. And what that means is that had there been a strange Israeli, let's say like me, and a strange Palestinian, let's say like my partner, Noor Awad, that wanted to have a cup of coffee together, there's no place to do it. Can we show the map? Next slide. There's no place to do it until 10 years ago, we founded the only joint Israeli-Palestinian community center in the whole West Bank, and you're sitting in it right now. It's the only joint space. It's the only place where the two sides can and actually do meet each other every day, every week, every month. Neighbors meeting neighbors. This community center is called the Dignity Center, Merkaz Karama. Karam is the Arabic word for dignity, and Merkaz is the Hebrew word for center. The Dignity Center allows the two enemies to meet each other on equal ground. What happens actually in the Dignity Center? Well, first of all, the activities are just like any other community center around the world. A little bit of sports activities, cultural activities. There's a lot of interfaith dialogue. There's a storytelling group. There is a playback group. There's a little group for kids, 5 years old, 7 years old. There's the high school youth movement, photography workshops, a lot of discussions of the other side's politics and culture. You may be coming for the first time to the Dignity Center. Let's say you're brought by your friend, and you're sitting on one side of the room, eyeing the other side as you see them across the divide. You may be poking your friend and saying, "Why did you bring me here? Look at them, they're going to kill me." And you're really, really afraid. I want to stop a minute about that fear. The two sides, before they come to the Dignity Center, are full of ignorance of the other, stereotypes, bigotry, what Americans might call racism, and lots of resentment, fear, and hate. And I want to tell you that fear kills. People kill because they're afraid of being killed, and people are killed because they're afraid of being killed. And these two sides, these two enemies with all of those emotions and trauma somehow gather in the Dignity Center. What do we do there? Well, we break the ice, begin one of the myriad activities, and the process of humanization begins. We are often surprised to discover that they're not the monsters we thought. They're not demons. We can actually talk to them. Palestinians to Israelis, Israelis to Palestinians. It's actually embarrassing when you realize how prejudiced you are, but you still are. My point now is to say that as important as it is to humanize the other side, it's not the most important thing that we do. There's a second stage to the work, and that is once you've discovered that there's a human being on the other side of the divide, you have to come face to face with the fact that that woman or that girl or that boy that you just met is the bearer of a national identity, a national political religious identity that contradicts yours. That what he or she thinks about you is the opposite of what you think about yourself. And what she thinks about herself is the opposite of what you think you know about her. To begin to accept these two different self-understandings on the collective level, and to begin to realize that there is some truth on the other side that is really, really hard. Why is it hard? Well, I think that most Israelis and most Palestinians, and since October 7th, I'm willing to say almost all Israelis and all Palestinians are sick in the heart. And this disease of the heart, the virus coursing through our veins, I have a name for it. I call it the hubris of exclusivity. The hubris of exclusivity. And it convinces us that I am real and you are fake. My people is legitimate and yours is fabricated. My people belong in this land and you don't. In the work that we do in the Dignity Center, not always, and certainly not immediately, and not completely, but a little bit of a process of healing begins. Healing of the heart, in which we begin to discover that as real and legitimate as my identity is, your identity is just as legitimate, and your rights, your aspirations on your future are just as real as mine am. We are Roots. We've created and founded the Dignity Center. And now I'd like to show a 2-minute film from the first 2 years of Roots. It's a trailer of a movie made for Israeli television about our work. The main character is Ali Abu Awad, our Palestinian founder, and it shows a little bit of the Dignity Center as it was 9 years ago.
אנחנו נמצאים כאן באדמה של המשפחה שלי. כשבאתי לכאן והחלטתי להקים מרכז פלסטיני שלי אלימות, אני מצפה שיתקפו אותי גם בחברה שלי וגם באוכלוסייה של המתנחלים. אבל אני יודע, כל עוד שאנחנו לא מדברים עם הימין, השמאל לא יעשה שלום.
The first time I had heard someone talk about being in Israeli jail, someone talking about suffering under occupation.
וזה שאני מכבד אותך, זה הכבוד שאני מכבד את עצמי כשאני מסתכל על עצמי בראי.
We believe that religion has to be part of the solution.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Adonai hu Elohim.
יהודים ניצודים בארץ ישראל כמו חיות, ממש. פשוט צדים אותם. צדים אותם. רואים רכב, איפה הם? איפה השותף? איפה האח?
אתה יושב על הכלכלה שלי, אתה יושב על הבית שלי, אתה יושב על הלב שלי, אבל לא כשותף.
האם אתה מוכן להודות שהישיבה שלך פה היא ישיבה של פשע? וממילא תגיד לי מבחינה פוליטית.
The Jewish people, that we own this land? We don't own this land. We belong to this land. And the Palestinian people also belong to this land.
אנחנו האחרונים בעולם שצריך לשבת אחד עם השני. באתי לבקש לדרוש איתה מחברי, מפני שאת ואני סבלנו שלא חיפשנו את זה לפני.
I'd like to present myself to you with 3 labels at the outset. I'm a Jew, and I'm a Zionist, and I'm a settler. When I say I'm a Jew, it's really important for me to emphasize that I'm not talking about religion. I'm a religious Jew, but before I'm religious, I'm a Jew. And what I mean when I say that word is that we're a people, the Jewish people. Not just a faith, not just a religion, a people. What do I mean by people? Perhaps the best way to explain it is an extended family. We go back 3,000 years to Abraham and Sarah in the Bible. They had children, their children had children. We became a clan, and then we became a tribe. The 12 tribes we became. The Jewish people are the descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel. And we understand ourselves to be part of a collective that has a common destiny, a common fate. We're all responsible for each other. We are tied together. And we're not only tied to each other, we're also tied to that land in which we were born. The Bible calls it the land of Canaan, later called the land of Israel. And to us it makes a lot of sense that you can't separate between the people of Israel and the land of Israel because, again, we're not just a faith or a religion. We're something close to a nation. Because of the deep, abiding connection between the land of Israel and the people of Israel, I can, from my personal perspective, move now from talking about myself as a Jew to talking about myself as a Zionist. Because for me, Zionism is nothing more than the second story, the continuation, the culmination, the consummation of being Jewish. Zionism is a political movement, the national liberation movement of the Jewish people, created about 150 years ago to bring the Jewish people back home to the land of Israel. Why do I say back home? Because the Jewish people lived in that land for 1,000 years, until in the year 70 of the Common Era, only a few decades after the death of Jesus, the Jewish people were defeated by the Holy Roman Empire. Our second Jewish Commonwealth was destroyed. The kings, the priests, the rabbis, the judges, and of course the common people were sent into exile. We found ourselves scattered in the Middle East, in Northern Africa. Later we went to Europe, Australia, and America. And during all of these 2 millennia since then, we are hoping, and we are praying, and we are yearning and crying, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, to come home. We've had a sense for these 2 millennia that we're not where we're supposed to be. We are in the diaspora, in exile, we're not at home, we're in limbo. Among the 3 million Jews from around the world who are ingathered by the Zionist movement to the land of Israel, one of them is standing right here now, me. I was born in New York. When I was 18, 19, 20, I got on the plane, I took my 2 bags, and I did what we call aliyah, ascension. I ascended to the land of Israel. I came home. I closed the circle. I fulfilled the dreams of my great-great-great-great-grandmother, my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, and I came out of the diaspora to live home with my people as they had hoped to do but never managed to. The feeling was of great exaltation. I said I'm a Jew, I said I'm a Zionist, then I said I'm a settler, which means I am an Israeli Jew, citizenship in the state of Israel, but I do not live in the orange that's the state of Israel proper. I moved over the dotted line, which is called the Green Line, into the West Bank. In 1947, the West Bank, and actually much more, was designated by the UN resolution to be a Palestinian state. In the war of 1947-48 that we Israelis called the War of Independence, that West Bank was conquered by Jordan and occupied by it for 19 years. In 1967, Israel conquered it from Jordan and has been occupying it since then. Israel allowed its citizens after the war to go and settle there. I was one of them. I still live there between Bethlehem and Hebron, south of Jerusalem. So I'm a settler. And I know very well that for many people, for me to be a settler and say that in front of you is akin to making a very dangerous, extremist political statement. I'm aware of that, and we'll get to it later. But for now, I want to tell you that for me, much more than making a political statement, I moved to where I live today to make a historical statement. And the historical statement is, if I've come home after 2,000 years of exile, I want to come home to the center of my homeland, to the place where it all began. The Jewish people were born in the West Bank. During the 1,000 years we lived in the land, we mostly lived in the West Bank. The coastal cities, whether it's Haifa, Hadera, Netanya, Ashdod, they're part of the land of Israel. Today they're part of the state of Israel, but Jews almost never lived there in the past. We lived in the West Bank. That's where we have our history, that's where the Bible was written, that's where we have our archaeology, that's where I can scrape the ground with my heel and come up with potsherds that our ancestors left 2,000 years ago, and those potsherds speak to me. They say, you're part of us. There's a continuity here, a chain of tradition, you've come home. For the same reason that I live there, I usually don't call it the West Bank. I call it Judea and Samaria. And I'm aware that to call it Judea and Samaria for many people sounds again like I'm making an extremist political statement. But I use those words to make a historical statement. The historical statement is this. The West Bank is a modern term. It's not a Jewish term. Beginning 2,500 years ago, the Jewish people called where I live Samaria and Judea. Samaria was the Jewish kingdom 2,500 years ago north of Jerusalem, the kingdom of the 10 tribes. And the kingdom below it, below Jerusalem to the south, was the kingdom of Judea. So I live where I live because of the continuity of Jewish history, and for that same reason I call it what I call it, Judea and Samaria. 10 years ago and about 2 months, I began to learn that everything I just said to you, I have no idea what I'm talking about. And I don't mean that it's all a lie, but I do mean that it's a half-truth. For my whole life, I thought that the half-truths I just told you were the whole truth. You see, for my whole life, and I'd lived in the West Bank for 33 years, and I'd never met a Palestinian until 10 years and 2 months ago. I lived in a Jewish bubble. I lived as if the Palestinians don't exist. They were transparent, and I was blind. They were like the gray, drab scenery that passes in the background of the movie, my movie. But they're not part of the plot. You could ignore them. And that's what I did. Today I know, after 10 years of interaction with my Palestinian neighbors, that Palestinians exist. They're real. They have a story. I believe that if you mistake half of the truth for the whole truth, then you're very close to falsehood. And I was there for my whole life, and I don't want to be there any longer. So 10 years and 2 months ago, I'm driving in my car, where I live in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, between Bethlehem and Hebron. I have in the car with me 2 Protestant pastors from the US, evangelicals. They asked that I show them how biblical prophecy is coming true. They believe in the same Bible I believe in, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. And the prophets a long time ago foretold that after a long, hard exile, the Jewish people would be ingathered back to the land of Israel. And they believed, like I believed, and like I believe, that it's happening today through the Zionist movement. They said, show us. So I drove them around with great pride. I showed them the acres upon acres of forests that we've planted and the roads that we've paved. and the many, many buildings and institutions and settlements and towns and cities that we have constructed there in the West Bank. And as we're driving, I saw a hitchhiker on the side of the road. I picked him up. After a while, another hitchhiker, I picked him up as well. We drove, and then the young men who I picked up asked that I stop the car. They got out. We started to drive again. And one of the pastors from Dallas, Texas, he said to me the following words. He said, Hanan, that was great. You just taught us a lesson in Jewish ethics. You picked up hitchhikers. No one does that in Texas. So I said to him, Bob, it's not just me around here. We all pick up hitchhikers. We have a common vision. We trust each other. And just like everyone else, I do my best to pick up every person who puts out his finger for a ride. And by the time I finished that sentence, I realized that I was lying. I was lying to Pastor Bob and Pastor Kevin. And even worse, I was lying to myself. I really believe, just like I said, that I pick up every person. But it wasn't true. I pick up only Jews. And what that means is that I did not see the Palestinians that were walking on the road with heavy baskets on their head or carrying heavy loads. I didn't see them. Or I didn't see them as significant human beings. I said I'd pick up every person. I'd never picked up a Palestinian in my life. And I said to Bob and Kevin at that moment that I think there's something wrong with me. There's a deep moral blemish. I'm a bigot. I was really taken aback, but it's clear to me that I want to fix this. I want to find a way to turn the Palestinians into human beings in my eyes, and the way I'm going to do it, I said to myself and I said to Bob and Kevin, is by meeting them. So I took upon myself to meet my Palestinian neighbors, and it wasn't easy. A lot of stories to tell. Here's the major incident. It's now the last Wednesday of January 2014. I have an invitation to meet local Palestinians. I have a map of where to go. I get up from the sofa I'm sitting in my living room. I walk to the front door, open the door, put one foot over the threshold, and my wife calls behind me, "Where are you going?" And I said to her, I'm going to meet Palestinians. And that's when all hell broke loose. She started to scream, what do you mean meet Palestinians? They'll kill you. And I came back into our home and I approached my wife and I saw the absolute terror in her eyes. She begged me not to go. I walked out the front door because I knew how to do this. My heart was pounding. I was afraid as she was. And I said to myself as I closed the door, perhaps she's right. Perhaps they will kill me. I'm walking through the fields and vineyards around my house. I didn't have to take the car, it's that close. In less than 25 minutes, I found myself approaching the piece of farmland that you guys are all now sitting in, what later became the Dignity Center. I walk in the middle gate. Inside, I see very few trees, a little bit animals here and there, no buildings, and I saw something I'd never seen before, something that you might call a miracle. I saw 15 Israelis, some of them my neighbors, and 15 Palestinians doing the strangest thing. They were talking to each other. Can you believe that? That doesn't happen where we come from. They're in little groups, 2 over here, 3 over here. And then I saw a Palestinian woman dressed in brown from head to toe. Only her face is visible, clearly an observant Muslim, and she's standing alone. So I walked right up to her and I said hello in English. She said hello back to me. We talked for about a minute. And then I said to her, I can't believe I'm talking to you. And she said to me, I can't believe I'm talking to you because we don't talk to Israeli settlers. I had no idea why she doesn't talk to Israeli settlers. But in any case, she kept talking to me. It seemed to be fine. The conversation went on only for a minute because her son walked over. She introduces me. She said his name is Yazin, and he's 17 years old. Yazin and I shook hands, and I see he's wearing a windbreaker, and on the jacket are 3 words in the English language, seeds of peace. Seeds of peace. Anyone here know what seeds of peace is? Very good. 3. people approximately. I had no idea what Seeds Peace is, but I remember looking at the jacket, it has the word peace on it, and looking at Yazin, he's a Palestinian, saying to myself, this can't be. Why would a Palestinian wear a jacket that says peace? They're violent people, they don't know anything about peace. Half jokingly, I said to Yazin, what's the Seeds of Peace thing? And I thought he was going to say, I don't know, someone gave me the jacket, I found it on the floor. That's not what he said. He said that Seeds of Peace is a summer camp in Maine, USA. And it takes Israeli kids and Palestinian kids out of the conflict zone for a summer of recreation and reconciliation. And Yazin told me that past summer he was in the camp, 2 months, had a great time, met Israeli kids his age, now they're friends on Facebook. He said that was in the days when kids are on Facebook. And then he said to me that he was so changed by meeting Israelis that now he wants to spend some of his life building bridges of peace between our two peoples. And I remember listening to Yazin and not knowing if I can believe what he's saying, because what he said contradicted everything that I knew to be true about Palestinians. And you could say that Yazin and his mother were the first two Palestinians that began the process of unsettling me. His father walks over. Jamal's a stocky guy, only a little bit taller than me. We shake hands. He says, where are you from? I'm from Alon Shvut. Where are you from, Jamal? Beit Umar. Jamal said those two words, Beit Umar, and I had half of a heart attack. Beit Umar, I know Beit Umar. It's a Palestinian city. 23,000 people live there. It's an 8-minute drive south of my home, and I've passed on the road past Beit Umar hundreds, perhaps thousands of times. My car's been stoned. Rocks are coming through the windshield. My wife and kids are screaming. The car is rocking. We're being attacked. Another time, a friend of mine was gunned down on that road and killed. A doctor coming home from work late at night after his shift at Hadassah Hospital. So I know the people in Beit Umar, they're dangerous. It turns out now he's talking to this woman. I talked to this young man. I'm talking to Jamal. It wasn't the easiest thing in the world for me to continue the conversation. Jamal starts telling me what brought him to this get-together of Israelis and Palestinians. Hanani said, you know, there's no Jews in Beit Umar. Okay. But there are the Jewish soldiers, he said, who guard the entrance to the city. And they make life miserable for us. We hate them. They prevent freedom of movement. And since they're the only Jews we know, by extension we hate all Jews. No one in Beit Umar would want to have a social meeting with a Jew. But he said that many years ago, he had a Palestinian friend in Jericho, city of Jericho. And this friend of his said, you know, I go monthly to these dialogue groups of Israelis and Palestinians. Why don't you come along? And Jamal said to me, I said to my friend, I'm never ever coming with you. That's only for the weak people and the traitors. A proud Palestinian doesn't go to meet the enemy. But the friend wouldn't get off his back, and every month he's trying to convince him. So eventually Jamal said, okay, I'll come with you. They sat in a circle, Israelis and Palestinians. Jamal said he didn't participate. He sat in the corner, but he listened. And at one point, Jamal told me, one of the Israeli men got up from his chair, and that frightened Jamal. And this Israeli guy looked at Jamal, who was really uptight what he's going to do to me. The guy came right up to Jamal and forced him to shake his hand. And then the guy asked him questions. Jamal had to answer. Jamal said it was extremely unpleasant. And when he finally walked away, Jamal said, I, Jamal, ran to the bathroom, was wiping the sweat off my brow and washing the filth off my hand from touching a Jew, and I vowed never to come back to this cursed place. Jamal said he went home and told his wife. She agreed he made a big mistake by going there. What has to happen now is never go back and never tell anyone in Beit Umar that he was there. But Jamal's friend had other plans. And I really don't know how, but somehow the friend talked to the wife, and the next month Jamal and his wife and that friend are in that same room, the Israelis and the Palestinians. That month, the next month, the month after, and every month after, Jamal told me, Hanan, where I thought there was only an enemy, I met a human being who turned out to be a partner, and that changed me. And I'm listening to Jamal. And just like I felt when I was listening to his son, I don't know if I can believe what he's saying. because it contradicts everything I know about Palestinians. It can't be, I'm saying to myself, that this Jamal guy from Beit Umar has become a peace activist. How could that be? And I'm getting very, very confused and challenged. It really wasn't easy. Jamal tells me another story. Hanan, you know, there's lots of little kids in Beit Umar. Okay, 5 years old, 7 years old. He said that when those kids see someone who looks like you, they start to cry. I said to Jamal, why do they start to cry? And he didn't understand why I don't understand. As if it's simple. You look at me, you start to cry. He's getting flustered. He doesn't know how to explain it to me. Then he says, it's the kippah you have in your head. And it's the beard. And it's those things hanging from your pants because so many people dressed like you, he said, walk into Beit Umar with their submachine guns and they kill the kids. So I thought that was borderline anti-Semitism. It's a blood libel. What is he talking about? We don't do things like that. I have to tell him off. And I'm getting more and more raging inside. And a second before I started yelling at him, a light bulb went off in my mind. And I said to myself that this is a moment of blessing. Because for the first time in my life, I'm experiencing how the other experiences me. And that could be a blessing if I'm able to hold it and process it and digest it and not just lash out in rage. Okay, so I'm not going to say anything to Jamal. I'm not going to tell him off, but what am I going to say? And then I have a vision in my mind's eye of my 2 grown sons and my son-in-law and their wives and their children, my grandchildren, and they're walking in the fields on a family outing, and I look at the 2 young men, the 3 young men, and they're all carrying pistols, just like all the other men of that age where I come from. And I suddenly realized that those guns must be frightening to little Palestinian kids. So I said, Jamal, what do you want me to carry guns? Because we're afraid of you. And he responded, no, you're not afraid of us. It can't be because we're afraid of you. And I didn't know how to process that. What are they afraid of? We're peace-loving people. Those guns are only for self-protection. And I'm getting very upset and very confused. I talked to other people that afternoon, other Palestinians, and as the sun's going down, we sat in a circle. 15 and 15 Israelis and Palestinians, and Ali Abu Awad, who you saw in the clip, who's the convener of the get-together we were part of, and the owner of the land that we were convening on. Ali Abu Awad gets up to talk in perfect Hebrew that it turns out he learned from many years in Israeli jail. And he said, my name is Ali Abu Awad. I'm from a proud Palestinian family. For generations we lived in Kubeba, and I said to myself, what's Kubeba? He said in 1948 there was a war, we had to leave the village. The Israelis took it over and later turned it into Lachish, and I said to myself, yeah, Lachish, I know where that is. We all came, most of the clan, to Beit Umar on the West Bank. He said we lived 19 years under Jordanian occupation, and since 1967 we're living under the difficulties and the rigor and the suffering of the Israeli occupation. Israeli occupation, he said? What is he talking about? I said to myself, what's Israeli occupation? Because never, until that point in my life, had I heard a human being use those 2 words in my presence. Never. Of course, I'd heard on the radio and read in the newspaper hundreds, thousands of times, the European Union, United Nations always condemning the Israeli occupation. But I had no idea that there really could be such a thing. Because when I drive in the fields of Samaria, the roads, when I walk in the fields of Judea, I don't see occupation. I see return of the Jewish people to our ancient homeland after 2,000 years of exile. What could be more righteous than that, I said to myself. And suddenly Ali's talking about being a Palestinian, living in Palestine. He said he's fighting non-violently for the liberation of Palestine. I said to myself, what's non-violent? They're so violent. And what are you talking about Palestine? I live in Israel. And he talks about his mother being a leader of the first Intifada, the first Palestinian uprising, giving out leaflets and organizing strikes. The Israeli soldiers said came into the house in the middle of the night and beat her up, and he had to witness that. And it happened the second time. They did the same thing. They took her to jail for 6 years, he said. And then he said he was thrown into Israeli jail, that means my jail, for 10 years and not told the charges in the secret file against him. And I'm getting so angry for these ridiculous things that Ali's saying. When I get up and say, you're a liar, Ali. But I couldn't get up and say he's a liar because he wasn't trying to convince us of anything. He was just telling the story of his life. And I went home that day extremely challenged and confused and angry and upset. And I remember going over in my mind the things that Jamal said and the things that Ali said and the things that I know to be true, and they're doing war inside me, these two opposing narratives, and I'm getting more and more nauseous. I'm pacing back and forth in my study, and I feel like I have to bend down and pick my stomach back up and put it in. I'm getting so sick. I knew I couldn't go on without figuring this out, so I went back to the same place that I first met Ali and Jamal. Ali was there. We started to talk. Jamal came a little bit later. I wasn't the only Israeli who wanted to meet Ali and Jamal. We were 3 and 3, and then 5 Israelis and 5 Israelis and Palestinians. Then we're 10 and 10 and 15 and 15. And every week, until the wee hours of the night, we sat and talked for weeks, for months, for years, 10 years now. And I want to try to describe some of what we've done and some of what we've learned. Almost at the outset, Ali Abu Awad, what we did is we told stories and we listened to stories. The Palestinians told us the stories of who they are, their past in the land, their families, their identity, their aspirations and their suffering. And we Israeli Jews told the Palestinians about 3,000 years of Jewish peoplehood, about 2,000 years of exile, about coming home through the Zionist movement to the land of Israel. It was very, very hard for each side to listen to the stories of the other side, because our stories contradict their stories and their stories contradict our stories. So hard to listen. Almost every moment of listening, you feel that you're a traitor. You're giving up on your identity by listening to these things that contradict the truth. And so many times we felt we wanted to get up and run away and not come back. So many times we felt we wanted to get up and tell them that they're wrong. But we didn't. We sat and we listened until it hurt, and we listened some more. And I want to make it clear that by and large, we did not engage in dialogue. It's not about dialogue. It's not about listening and responding. It's not about debate. It's not about poking holes in their argument. It's about hearing who they are and then going home and stewing over it, contemplating it, trying to figure out how it could be true, and then coming back and you tell your story and they listen with great difficulty, and then they contemplate if it could be at all true. It's really, really difficult. Almost from the outset, Ali Abu Awad told us that what you Israelis, Jews, think about the Palestinians is true. Yes, Ali said, most Palestinians, he said, not me, but most Palestinians go to sleep at night dreaming that the Israelis will disappear tomorrow from this land. Because we Palestinians, Ali said, know that the Jews don't belong. And if we hold on long enough, then the Jews will get up and leave. It was really hard for us Jews to hear Ali say that most Palestinians think like that. But you know what? We Israeli Jews had to admit that we go to sleep at night with the same dream that the Palestinians will disappear tomorrow, because we know that they don't belong. And if we hold on hard enough and fight violently enough, they'll leave. Ali told us that the Palestinians have no other place to go. And we Jews told the Palestinians that we have no other place to go. So now, what happens when you listen to the other side's stories of belonging in the land? You hear the same story from different people on that side again and again and again, and they hear your stories. You begin to realize that they're not going anywhere. and you begin to realize that you have been building your life in the land on the basis of a fantasy, of an illusion, because we all think eventually we will be there without the other side, but it's not going to be. And that fries your brain. You have to re-understand the past, the present, and especially the future in light of that fundamental understanding that no one is going anywhere. Both sides are there to stay. That's hard. We also came to realize that Israelis and Palestinians construct their identities upon the erasure of the other side's identity. Both sides think they can tell the other side who they are. You know what Israelis say about Palestinians? They say, Palestinian, you know it's a made-up identity. You know it's fake. You know there never was a Palestinian state. You're just Arabs. So go back to Saudi Arabia you came from. Why did you come to take our land? And what do the Palestinians say to the Jews? They say, Jew, that's great. The Quran greatly respects Judaism, but it's a faith, it's a religion, it's not a people, not a nation. You don't need land, so go back to Russia you came from. Why did you come to take our land? But after you listen to the other side's stories again and again and again, you realize you know nothing about who they are. And you cannot tell them who they are. You have to listen and let them tell who they are, and they will listen when you tell who you are. We learned, I would say, 3 major things. Number 1, there is such a thing as the Palestinian people. Corollary of number 1, there is such a thing as the Jewish people. Number 2, there is such a thing as the land of Palestine. Corollary of number 2, there is such a thing as the land of Israel. Number 3, the Palestinians are deeply connected and they belong to the land of Palestine. Corollary, you guessed it, the Jews are deeply connected and they belong to the land of Israel. And now, the most excruciatingly difficult point of all, the boundaries of the historical land of Palestine are from the river to the sea. The Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea is all Palestine. And the borders of the historical land of Israel are from the Mediterranean Sea to the Jordan River. That same land has 2 identities. The Holy Land has given birth to 2 peoples, 2 siblings. They both belong to the land. And that is so hard for Israelis and Palestinians to accept because of the disease of the hubris of exclusivity. So what happens in the work of Roots and the Dignity Center is not denying who you are. You remain a Jew or a Muslim or a Palestinian or a Christian. You remain a Zionist or a Palestinian nationalist, but you come to expand your identity, to include not just you and your people, but the other side as well. Ali Abu Awad says it very succinctly. We have to find a way to fit 2 truths into one heart. 2 truths into one heart is the only way to fit 2 peoples into one land. And I'm going to say that in different language. You don't have to be wrong for me to be right. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Israelis and Palestinians, or in the US, conservatives and liberals, or Democrats and Republicans, or Jews and Christians and Muslims. So many people think that if you are right, then I am wrong, so I better spend all my energy proving that you are wrong so I can be right. But it doesn't work that way. It's not a zero-sum game. You can be right and I can be right as well. I have to come to transform my identity, to expand my identity, in our case, to be the Jew I am and the Zionist I am, deeply connected to the whole land, and at the same time come to recognize and to cherish and to bring into my identity Palestine and the Palestinians as well. That, we believe, in Roots is the only way forward. I'm going to summarize with 3 points again. Number 1 is the work of Roots is only in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. There are over 140 small people-to-people peace-building organizations that work within Israel proper in the orange. But we in Roots have devoted our work only to the heart of the problem. Unfortunately, most other peace organizations say, and I understand this, that the settlers are the problem, so you can't talk to them. We say the settlers are the problem, so you have to talk to them. If we don't bring the settlers into the dialogue, I should say the non-dialogue, if we don't get them to recognize Palestinian identity, we're not going anywhere with the peace process. So we have our center between Bethlehem and Hebron, the Dignity Center. We have another local association of Israelis and Palestinians in the north, south of Nablus. We have another one in the Jordan Valley, and we have a number of activists scattered throughout the West Bank. We work in the heart of the problem. Number two, religion. Let's be very clear. Religion is part of the problem. I'll be even clearer. Judaism, my religion, is part of the problem. Islam is part of the problem. There are many interpretations of Judaism that are prevalent today in Israel and especially in the West Bank that are fueling this conflict and making it worse and worse, making it into a religious conflict. And there are many beliefs, interpretations of Islam today prevalent in the West Bank that are fueling this conflict. We say in Roots, if religion is part of the problem, and it is, we have to make it part of the solution. Most peace organizations say the religious people are the ones that are causing the problem, so we have to ignore them. We can't talk to them. We say in Roots, if religious people and religion is part of the problem, we have to make them part of the solution. So interfaith dialogue is a central part of the work we do, and interfaith dialogue does not mean discussing the texts we have in common, the nice texts. Love your neighbor as yourself. I believe in it, but it's not relevant. We discuss the difficult texts that are fueling this conflict, and we find ways to engage in a process of collective repentance in which we find interpretations that will allow us to live together. It's really hard. Thirdly and lastly, settlements. You heard me say that Roots recognizes that the land from the river to the sea is all Palestine. We also recognize that the land from the sea to the river is all historical Israel. That means that Palestinians and Jews should have the right to live everywhere, including the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria, but not at the expense of the other side. And the settlement movement that I am part of has been engaging in the settlement of the land of Israel in the West Bank in a fashion that comes at the expense of our Palestinian neighbors. That is wrong. That is bad. That has to end. And our work in Roots is geared towards putting an end to that. There's a word for it. It's called occupation. And let's put it on the table. My people, the Jewish people, the Israeli people are occupying the Palestinian people who have no rights and no dignity and no freedom. And that is a travesty that has to change. And it's going to change. We in Roots, through our people-to-people work of coming to recognize the other side's humanity and identity, we believe we are providing the human groundwork for a future political settlement that will grant dignity, equality, freedom, human rights, and security in that little sliver of land that we both call home. Thank you. At this point, Noor is to come and speak. Noor and I have been partners. Noor Awad of Bethlehem, a proud Palestinian. We've been partners in this work for 7-8 years. He joined us only 3 years since we began. Noor and I have been touring the US for the past 2 weeks, and recently his life was threatened. And he is afraid. Noor and I drove to campus, and then he decided he can't come in. I don't want to go into the nature of the threats. I can't. So with great pain, I can tell you, with great pain, I can tell you that you can see videos of Noor on our website. The website is friendsofroots.net. friendsofroots.net. And I have no choice at this point but to show the video that we show after Noor speaks.
مرحبا، اسمي خالد أبو عواد من قرية بيت أمار فلسطين.
שלום, אני הדסה פרומן מתקוע.
Wait a second.
של הרב מנחם פרומן זיכרונו לברכה.
Shalom, my name is Shaul. I live in Tekoa.
Hi, I'm Bilal. I'm from Beit Umar.
My name is Rabbi Schlesinger, and I live in Alon Shvut.
4 years ago, here in our family land, Roots start. Roots is a partnership between people from both sides, people who believe in non-violence, dignity and quality between our people. Dignity for me is when you respect the other one, when you give him the space for his life, when you respect his opinion, his culture. This is the dignity, and it's very important for us, the Middle East people. We try here to give another picture to the people in order to increase the hope inside them.
We work in many different directions, but one of the core things that happens here is the people-to-people work.
واحد ثلاثة
3 years ago, nobody could imagine a space where Israeli and Palestinian youth from the West Bank could meet each other and work together on building a better future. This cannot happen without friendship, without love for each other, and to have fun together.
In all of my life, before I come to youth group, I only went once to Israel or to beach. It was very emotional to go with each other because I never imagined that I would go to beach with an Israelis, you know.
All of these programs engage with our local communities, bringing people who are a little bit afraid to come and came for the first time and then saw something that surprised them and became involved.
אנחנו פה עומדים כולנו בכאב גדול. והשאלה איך גורמים לזה שזה לא יהיה עוד פעם ולא נעמוד פה באותו בכי.
It was so important when Roots went to Lezion Junction, you know, to protest against the violence in Duma. And both Palestinians and Israelis should condemn violence and should stand with each other against violence. It should show the people, the world, and also the extremists on both sides that there are Palestinians who are against violence and they are protesting and they are saying no violence in my name, and also Israelis who are saying the same thing.
We expand our circles in many ways. I travel and speak all over Israel, in the radio, in the television, and a lot of meeting with young people. People are thirsty to hear what we are doing. They don't believe the dream of peace can become real.
Roots Network today includes representatives from 28 different Israeli and Palestinian towns in this area, this local area.
Roots has created a miracle, an expanding island of sanity, a veritable Garden of Eden, in a land full with so much ignorance of the other, prejudice, stereotypes, and fear. We are beginning to bring a little bit of healing, deep recognition of the other's belonging to this land, preparing the ground for a future of coexistence, human rights, dignity, and mutual recognition. We need your help. We ask you to join us and join the thousands of people around the globe who are supporting Roots. Instead of exporting the Palestinian-Israeli conflict to the four corners of the globe, help us to export recognition and respect. Thank you very much. That was 6 years ago, so the reach of Roots is at least double, if not triple, today. What we'd like to do now is to open it up to questions, and perhaps I could give some answers. And as we begin with the questions, we'll show a slide of the QR code. This is a QR code that can help you to sign up for the newsletter of Roots. We send out something monthly, not more than once a month. You can hear about the work and the new developments through signing up for our newsletter. And if you're not able to use the code, we can also pass out, we passed out already? Okay, and the code is also in the sheets we're passing out. So with that, I'm open to the first question. Okay, so the first question is always the hardest. Let's start with the second question. Second question.
Thank you so much for a fabulous presentation, a really powerful one. It sounds a little bit like a great rationale for the one-state solution. Is that accurate to say or not?
A very important question, and we get it every time, so it really means that our presentation does sound like we are leading towards the one-state solution. The answer is yes and no. Yes, that a one-state solution, in other words, a binational secular state between the river and the sea, could be a way of partially satisfying the principles that I put on the table, but only partially. Because it turns out, so we've learned, that the vast majority of Israelis, Israeli Jews, and the majority, although not the vast majority of Palestinians, need, for the fulfillment of their identity, an expression of national sovereignty. In other words, they feel they need a Palestinian state, and they feel they need a Jewish state. So the one-state solution doesn't satisfy those fundamental needs of identity. Okay, so let's look at the two-state solution. Two-state solution, Israel where it is more or less today, and Palestine where the West Bank is today, with perhaps some land swaps, that provides sovereignty for each side's national identity. That's good, but it violates the other principle that we put on the table, which is that Palestine is from the river to the sea, and Israel is from the river to the sea. So the one-state solution satisfies the river to the sea, but it doesn't satisfy national sovereignty of each side, and the two-state solution satisfies national sovereignty, but not the sense of connection to the whole land. So it looks like there's no solution. There are some members of Roots who support the one-state solution, some who support the two-state solution. It appears to me, and I'm saying this now partially as a roots representative, partially as myself, and it appears to me and to Noor that the better answer is the hybrid between the one state and the two state. And that's confederation. In other words, two states, Israel and Palestine, separated by the green line that separates today Israel from the West Bank, but not two separate states, two confederated states, like the European Union. And think of France and Germany. When I think of France and Germany, I'm thinking of two elements. One, freedom of movement. Number two, freedom of residency. What that means is that just like we have in the European Union, so it would be in Israel-Palestine, that you could move freely across the border. It would be a soft border. And secondly, you could live even your whole life on the other side of the border. Example, you could be a Palestinian, born in Tel Aviv, or in Ramallah, or where we are right now, in the area of Villanova, and you can come home to Palestine, get citizenship in Palestine, but you don't have to live your life in Palestine. You could go and live in Israel. As a citizen of Palestine, but a resident of Israel, voting in Palestinian national elections and in Israeli local elections. And you can be an Israeli, let me say that better, you can be a Jew, born in a settlement, or born in Tel Aviv, or born in New York, come home to Israel, the state of Israel, get citizenship, and live your whole life in the state of Palestine, with Palestinian residency, but Israeli citizenship, voting in Israeli national elections and in Palestinian local elections. The organization, the political organization Israel and Palestine that is promoting this plan is called A Land for All. A Land for All. They have a good website. You can look it up, A Land for All. And the program is called Two States, One Homeland. And of course, it's just a pipe dream because it requires trust, and there's no trust. But the work of Roots is to provide the trust necessary for any future political settlement.
I was just wondering what's the difference in population numbers from the land to the sea, Palestinian versus Israeli?
From what I've read, today there is more or less an equal number of Jews and Palestinians between the river and the sea. And I'll add that for many, many Israelis, perhaps most, and many, many Palestinians, perhaps most, there is, among all the other acts of war going on, there is a battle of demographics. Who's going to have more children so that we, whoever we is, can control the other side? Notice that in the plan that I put forth, the demographic war is diffused. Because even if there's more of this side or more of that side, I have to explain this, see what I'm saying. From the Israeli perspective, there's always the fear there will be too many Palestinian citizens. But according to this plan, Palestinians could come back home, live in Israel, but not be citizens of Israel, rather be citizens of Palestine. And I think without certain background I didn't give, that's not clear, but those who understood.
Thank you very much again for the important work you're doing. I have a question about after the war. So how are things now? Is there hope for future? That's the first part. And second part about in our modern world, nothing is local. So everything is, and especially in this situation, we are all aware that tensions are, it's a lot of heartbreaking things are happening. So would you have any recommendation for here in United States? So we also have, some tensions here. So first part about how are things for Roots and the region after the World War, and do you see hope for future? And the second part, what would you recommend for us here as we see the reflections here?
Hope. Hope is so important. When people don't have hope for a better future, they despair. And then they either tune out and don't take responsibility, or they become violent. There's no doubt that the events of October 7th and the events following October 7th destroyed much of the hope that was remaining in Israel-Palestine. It's almost impossible to describe how Israelis are traumatized and fearful as a result of the events of October 7th. So many people, so many Israelis, even people who were borderline peace activists before October 7th, are now entrenched in the tribal circle the wagons attitude that says, I don't have a drop of empathy for the other side, they can all go to hell. Really. And on the Palestinian side, the events not of October 7th, but of October 8th, 9th, and 10th since then, in which Israel attacked from the air and from the sea and from the land, Hamas in Gaza, and at this point, over 26,000, I think, Gazans have been killed. That has just about extinguished any hope there may have been on the Palestinian side. The work of Roots today is at a standstill because the two sides are just afraid of each other. Two sides don't know what to say to each other. The two sides, those who are willing to talk to the other side at this point, are putting up preconditions. I'm willing to talk to you if you condemn X, Y, and Z. And in most cases, the other side cannot condemn in the fashion that that side wants, and vice versa. Actually, I can elaborate. If you remind me where I was when I finished it, I'll go back to it. Even Israelis who are willing to talk to Palestinians are saying, I'll talk to you if you condemn the massacre of October 7th and condemn it without any ifs, ands, and buts. And the Palestinians respond, of course, not everyone, I'm generalizing. Yes, of course I condemn the massacre. I condemn it absolutely, it's wrong and terrible, but you have to know it had a reason, it had a context. There was occupation, there was siege of Gaza, it didn't come out of nowhere. And the Israelis respond, for me, that's not a condemnation at all. It sounds like your explanation is giving legitimacy and the conversation doesn't start. And then the Palestinians, those who are willing to talk to Israelis, say, I'm willing to talk to you if you condemn the Israeli attack on Gaza and if you call for a ceasefire. And the Israelis, not all of them, of course, but the vast majority will say, I'm very, very, very sorry for the terrible loss of life, but the call for a ceasefire right now is to give a free rein to Gaza, to Hamas to regroup and do another October 7th. And then the Palestinians say, I can't talk to you. I'll tell you that for the first 3 months after October 7th, most of my work in Roots personally was preventing the organization from imploding. Getting the Israelis and the Palestinians, the leadership, not to put up those preconditions and to talk to each other, and I'm happy to say we succeeded. The leadership is still intact, but we haven't done any on-the-ground activities, not just because the two sides are not willing to talk to each other, but because Palestinians are now under Israeli military siege. In other words, every Palestinian village in the West Bank today is under Israeli blockade. The Israeli army won't let them move from city to city, village to village, for fear of an attack. And that means that the Palestinians can't come to our Dignity Center. So the work we've done is on Zoom, and it's mostly not been the two sides meeting each other on Zoom. It's either been each side separately, or each side hearing a lecture from one of the other side. It's one Palestinian hand-picked who knows how to talk to the side, has talked to 40, 50, 60 Israelis, and vice versa. Hope was the question, right? That was right, I'm here, right? Hope was the question. So if you're a rationalist and you see things realistically, you can say there's no hope. And I get it. I'm not willing to live like that. When there's no hope, then there's really no hope. Everything's finished. I've seen from past rounds of violence. They've never been as serious as this one, but I've seen past rounds of violence in which there's lots of trauma, and there's lots of fear, and there's lots of tribal mentality circling the wagons, but it dissipates. When violence calms down, people get over those emotions and they go back to their natural disposition of beforehand, and they say, okay, perhaps we can try it. So I'm hopeful, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't hopeful, that we can pick up the pieces and go back and begin the work again. We will not begin where we left off. We'll be years behind. Now, I also want to say, in the same context, that there is a symbiotic relationship between the people-to-people grassroots work that is from below above and the political work that is from above to below. You need both for a better future. You need the roots work repairing the human hearts and minds for a peace settlement and accepting the other side. You need a political settlement that's actually going to sign on a dotted line and create a political settlement. There can't be a political settlement without some grassroots work, and there can't be grassroots work without a hope of a political settlement. And I'm hopeful that there's a possibility after the war of a grand deal with Saudi Arabia, with the US, with the two-state solution, with Israel getting not only carrots but also sticks, that perhaps a new government in Israel will be willing to sign a two-state solution. And if that happens, it's only a hope, right? There's no guarantee at all. If that happens, then the grassroots will really sprout and people will say, now I'm willing to meet the other side. And that's when we'll really be needed, and that's when we'll be able to really scale up 1,000-fold. That was the first question. The second one was, give me a hint.
So here, what we can do here.
Yeah. Do you mean concerning my conflict, concerning your conflicts? Both?
Both, but as we are also having interfaith activities here, and we have lots of, we see the reflections. So what would you suggest?
So look, obviously, in Roots we believe and we bless interfaith dialogue in America between religions, between cultures, between races, right? That's a no-brainer to me. It means reaching out beyond your comfort zone in who you meet and who you talk to and what you read and the news that you listen to and the Facebook or Instagram posts that you read. We have to be able to go beyond our comfort zones. And look, concerning our conflict, my conflict, we've succeeded in exporting it to the four corners of the universe, including to America, which is bad all around. I'll say a few more words about that at the very, very, very end, and I think we're coming to the very end, right? So I'll take one more question, I guess.
So just to follow up what you said, has there been either before October 7th or after any activities on college campuses that would benefit of your model?
Thank you for asking. So we've spoken on many college campuses, and about 100, and we've been told that sometimes our work is used as a model. In addition to that, we have a campus affiliate. It's now on the University of Texas in Austin. It's now at UPenn. We're speaking there tonight. And it's also at Harvard, and they're working on a chapter. Is it in NYU? It's called Atidna. Atidna is a contraction of two words, one Arabic, one Hebrew, and it means our future. So let's show the next slide. Not the next slide, but the one after, which we'll get to later, we'll see a QR code concerning Atidna. So anyone who wants to take a picture of this slide of things you can do, you can take a picture. We'll leave it on for 10 seconds. I see no one's taking a picture. We'll go. Someone's taking a picture. So we'll give you 10 seconds. And then we'll go to the next slide. So it says that our website is friendsofroots.net. Please look at our website. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. If anyone here has money, you can give us money because we really, really need money to continue our work, obviously. Is this the second slide already? Okay, so we do Zoom presentations. We have an American Friends of Roots, a nonprofit board that meets by Zoom once a month to support the work of Roots, help us with fundraising, with publicity, with legal issues, with social media, and with just wisdom and advice. I guess we can go to the next slide. This is the QR code for the email of Elijah Kallenberg, who founded, together with a Palestinian friend of his, a Tidna at the UT Austin, and they are expanding into other campuses. Guess we can wait a few seconds. So we'll go to the next slide. This is the last slide. You can screen the film. I mean, the one before that, yeah. Anyone who wants to take a picture can take a picture. By the way, I personally believe in the power of reading memoirs from the other side. I'm an Israeli. I know about my people's experience. I try to read memoirs from the Palestinian side, and it changes you, opens you up, expands you. I'm going to end with a few sentences. If you came here today as a strong supporter of Palestine, we hope you leave as a strong supporter of Palestine. And if you came here today as a strong supporter of Israel, we hope you leave as a strong supporter of Israel. But what we hope is that you will not leave as a strong supporter of one side at the expense of the other side. Because it's clear to us that if Israel does not get what it needs, wants, and deserves, the Palestinians won't get what they need, want, and deserve. And if the Palestinians don't get what they need, want, and deserve, Israel will not get what it needs, wants, and deserves. And therefore, our parting message is pro-Israel, pro-Palestine. That's really the only way to be pro a better future for both sides. Thank you.
So listen, thank you guys for coming today. We do have a gift that we want to give to Roots. This is coming from Peace Islands Institute. So,
you and Noor would like to give all Roots. Thank you very much for your important work there. Very nice.
Thanks again, you guys, for coming. If you have any other questions or anything, you can come on up here. Thanks again.